and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Annika Izagiri. I'm Communications Director with the Committee to Protect Healthcare, and thank you for joining us today. We are joined by physicians in Maine, Michigan, and North Carolina in the wake of yesterday's ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court in a case involving access to the medication abortion drug mifepristone. The Michigan physician originally slated to take part today had a conflict arise, but we are happy to be joined by Dr. Melissa Bain, an OBGYN in West Michigan. So thank you, Dr. Bain, for joining us. As you all likely know, the Supreme Court yesterday granted a stay in what's now called Gen Bio Pro v. Louisiana, preserving Americans' current access to the medication abortion drug mifepristone. That means that the Fifth Circuit's previous dangerous ruling that would have restricted telehealth access to medication abortion nationwide is blocked for now. While this stay is a welcome development, we know the threat to access remains as the Fifth Circuit considers the case. The physicians today are coming to us from states where abortion is legal to some extent and where women's freedom to access mifepristone could be curtailed depending on the Fifth Circuit's ruling. Before we begin, I want to note that these physicians are speaking as individuals and with the Committee to Protect Healthcare, not necessarily on behalf of any employer. So we respectfully ask that you only refer to them in any coverage as they introduce themselves on the call, and please do not include employment information unless they expressly share that. Thank you in advance for being respectful of that. Without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, Dr. Nalaboff.
Hi, thank you for attending this webinar. I'm Dr. Jay Nalaboff. I'm a retired OBGYN who practiced 35 years at a small rural hospital in Maine. I've continued to be active in OBGYN issues, and so it's a pleasure being here today. So as physicians across the country, we're here to share our temporary relief in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision yesterday that patients across the country will still have access to medication abortion through telehealth for the time being. But we're also reminding people that the threat isn't over. The Supreme Court ruled that the abortion medication, mifepristone, can continue to be accessed by telehealth and picked up at a pharmacy or received by mail. This is great news for patients today, but with the case being sent back to the Fifth Circuit, the future of medication abortion access remains in the hands of judges and not doctors. It wouldn't surprise me at all if next year the same decision is being considered by the court. And this adds to the chaos and confusion that tends to harm patients simply trying to understand how to get the care they need. We know that attacks on abortion medication will continue, and anti-abortion extremists are continuing to try and restrict medication abortion via mifepristone, via telehealth and pharmacies, and not in just states, but nationwide. If they succeed, American women won't be able to pick up mifepristone, which they've been prescribed at a pharmacy. They'll have to go in person to a doctor's office to receive this safe and effective medication. So mifepristone is a routine, safe part of abortion care. It's been approved by the FDA, and numerous studies, 100 studies I read today, have shown that prescription of mifepristone via telehealth is just as safe as through an in-person visit with a healthcare provider. Now, Mainers know that these personal medications decisions should be between women and their doctors. We're an independent lot. We don't want personal healthcare decisions made by judges or legislatures, especially when they're from out of state. But this court case, which came about because of anti-abortion politicians in the state of Louisiana who decided to sue the FDA and put their personal ideology first, could dictate what Mainers can and cannot do. One state's abortion ban should not be used to restrict access to medication abortion nationwide. When the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, they claimed they were turning abortion rights, quote, back to the states. But it's clear that the goal all along was to ban abortion nationwide. Access to reproductive health care, including medication abortion, must be protected, and that requires leadership in our communities, our states, our profession, and in Washington, D.C. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague in Michigan, Dr. Bain.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Dr. Melissa Bain. I'm a OBGYN practicing in rural West Michigan for about the last 20 years, and I'm here today as part of the Reproductive Task Force for the Committee to Protect Healthcare. I'm proud to join Dr. Nalaboff and Dr. Beckham, who will speak next, in supporting access to mifepristone, the abortion medication, via telehealth. We're far from alone. Over 2,200 physicians across the United States have signed a letter organized by the Committee to Protect Healthcare urging the U.S. Supreme Court to permanently restore access to the abortion medication mifepristone via telehealth, not restrict it. Since the Supreme Court's ruling yesterday is only a temporary reprieve, we want to be very clear. Any future decision to restrict mifepristone access would not be grounded in science. It would not be grounded in patient safety. Mifepristone is not a new medication. In fact, it was approved by the FDA in the year 2000. Since then, for over 25 years, which has been all of my practice, it's been proven to be safe and effective. And in 2023, the FDA concluded that it is safe for medication abortion to be distributed via telehealth and through pharmacies, which we have been doing in rural West Michigan. These attempts to restrict abortion access are centered around politics, not patients. If it's banned via telehealth and pharmacy pickup, it's patients who pay the price. It's not just patients seeking abortion care, but also patients seeking miscarriage care. Mifepristone is the first step in the standard care regimen for both. Requiring a patient to see me in person to have access to this medication does not add any safety improvements. It only creates an additional barrier to essential care. And let's be clear about what patients will suffer the most with additional barriers. Although it will be more burdensome, those with time and resources to wait for in-clinic appointments and travel long distances to the nearest clinic will still be able to access care. But patients who live in rural areas like where I'm from in West Michigan, or hardworking Michiganders who can't take a day or maybe multiple days off work to drive across the state for care, that's who would be most affected by restrictions like this. Decisions around abortion and miscarriage should be allowed to be private between patients and their medical providers and physicians, whether in person or via telemedicine, which so many patients rely on these days, especially in rural West Michigan. But judges and politicians are breaking that privacy. They're undermining the trust between patients and physicians. They're causing confusion, and they are willing to put vulnerable folks at risk for political gains, not because they truly care about science or safety. Like Dr. Nalaboff, I want to be clear that Michigan patients in need of abortion or miscarriage care can and should still talk to their health care providers and get care. Michiganders have the right to abortion in our state, but we need our federal leaders to defend it for us. Policies that restrict telehealth access to medication abortion and miscarriage management put our patients at risk, particularly those in rural communities like mine. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague from North Carolina, Dr. Beckham. Thank
Thank
you.
you all for Thank you, Dr. Bain. Thank you all for being here. It may sound a little redundant, but I'm going to repeat some of the same things that you've heard. My name is Jenna Beckham. I'm a board certified OBGYN and a complex family planning subspecialist in North Carolina. Like my colleagues, I live in a state where abortion, although with restrictions, does remain legal. In North Carolina, abortion is legal up to 12 weeks and 6 days of pregnancy. And while these restrictions and this limitation does prevent us from being able to provide care to many patients in North Carolina, we do at least still have more freedom than many patients in the majority of our southern neighboring states who have even more extreme restrictions. Unfortunately, however, a court ruling restricting mifepristone access would step right on the freedom and the ability that we have to provide care that still remains. The legal back and forth is already creating chaos and confusion for patients in North Carolina who are just trying to access safe, effective care for both abortion and miscarriage. Every North Carolinian deserves access to comprehensive health care. No one in our state should have to risk their health or even their life because they live far away from a doctor's office, or as Dr. Bain said, perhaps even they live close but just don't have the time or ability to take off of work, get childcare, etc. No patient who is dealing with a miscarriage or in need of abortion care should be forced to drive hundreds of miles to pick up a medication that is not just effective, but that we know is exceedingly safe. Not to mention that gas prices in North Carolina are over $4 a gallon. So those drives not only require time, but are exceedingly expensive for patients. People are struggling to get by, let alone get hundreds of miles away for basic health care. Like my colleagues, I want my patients in North Carolina to know that they can still get care legally here. But politicians and judges in other states are trying to make it harder and harder for patients to get care when and where they need it, and for reasons that are absolutely not based in science or any medical evidence. Doctors and other healthcare clinicians know that the medication mifepristone is very safe, safer than common medications like Viagra, Tylenol, and countless other medications that patients and people throughout the country don't think twice about taking, and that certainly don't attract the attention of politicians. Judges should not be the ones making decisions around medications, particularly mifepristone. And we know that the voters don't want them to do that either. Polling shows that 60% of voters say the court should not overrule doctors and the FDA on how patients access medications. And 72% say that medical decisions, including those about abortion medication, should be made between patients and their physicians and other healthcare clinicians. The people of North Carolina deserve leaders at every level who deserve or who prioritize access to this care. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Beckham, Dr. Bain, and Dr. Nalaboff. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have a question for one or any or all of the physicians, you are welcome to use the Q&A function. You can use the chat function and type your question. Or if you prefer, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to unmute and verbally ask your question. So we will allow a few moments for folks to be able to type their question or raise their hand. In the meantime, I had one chatted to me. I'm going to share it with you all in the chat. It's, have you heard concerns from patients throughout this court process? That's for anyone.
Yeah, I can take this one from in Michigan. You know, mifepristone, especially in rural Michigan, it's a lifeline for access to care. And so when that access is limited, people are worried because, like Dr. Beckham said, like gas prices are exorbitant right now. The one of the main risks to people in rural areas when they're traveling to appointments is car accidents, and the our community knows this. We were just getting out of a horrendous winter, and having that blockage to care is just, it's unnecessary and unsafe. So yes, patients are worried and they're talking about it.
And I'll add, not only worried, but patients are confused. This medication is in news headlines. It's back and forth. It's restricted. It's not. It's restricted. It's not. And so I think they're worried, but they also, I hear from them sort of, I can't keep up with this. What is legal, right? Is it changing again? I think all of our patients and us as physicians in the last few years have been through such what I call a little bit of medical legal whiplash, where we have to keep up with things that are rapidly changing, and we have the a little more training and we have the knowledge, and so we at least understand the medical science part of it. I will say that sometimes the legalese is I have to get some consultation in that area, but if you think about a average patient who's not a physician, who's not an attorney, this is exceedingly confusing for them as well.
Do you find it confusing for your colleagues too? I know, there are states where women have been seriously harmed by emergency rooms not taking care of them during the course of a miscarriage, for example, because they were afraid of legal action.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's incredibly true, right? Particularly, I mean, even OBGYNs are confused, but particularly, as you mentioned, our non-OBGYN colleagues who perhaps don't have their fingers on the pulse of the rapidly changing, legal requirements and restrictions. That's absolutely a case as well.
And I'll share too from and as it relates to using mifepristone for miscarriage management, this medication, there's a before and after in my lens as a physician who didn't have access to this for a while. And when we're helping patients manage miscarriage, mifepristone is one of the most safe and effective ways to help people manage their miscarriage. And when we don't have access to that, the alternative is risky procedures and patients having to come in for procedures in the office and in surgery and go under anesthetic. And those procedures carry additional risks completely outside of just the miscarriage itself. And my community, we were close enough to where we didn't have access to mifepristone, and they remember that. And so that is a knowledge here that patients are worried about, that when they hear about this, it's that is this the next step to us not having access to mifepristone again? And they know when their sister and their wife and their daughter and themselves went under had to go a D&C in the middle of the night for their miscarriage. And now that is so rare for us that we have access to this medication. So that's another piece that patients are absolutely talking about.
And certainly during my career, we did not have access to mifepristone. And so, yes, midnight D&Cs, anesthesia for any reason is so much riskier than taking a medication by mouth that the risks of miscarriage management are down significantly.
Thank you all. I see we have a couple raised hands and a couple questions in the Q&A. I'll start with the raised hand for Isha, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you should be allowed to talk now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my question is for sorry, Dr. Nalabov. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but I'm a reporter in Maine, and Maine has obviously preserved and protected abortion access. So I wonder what this means for patients in Maine, and what the state can do over the next year. As you mentioned, this might very well be in the courts next year. And meanwhile, what can the state do to further preserve access? Is there anything at the state level?
Well, I think certainly the legislature and the governor have spoken pretty forcefully about abortion access in Maine, to their credit. I think the big risk is that if the Supreme Court had ruled that mifepristone could not be obtained through the mail or through telehealth, that patients are going to have to go to the physician. Again, we have the same winters as Dr. Bain has in Michigan, so they have to travel. They would have to pick it up. They would have to show up in their doctor's office, raises privacy concerns. And so, because the Supreme Court has stayed that so far, there's been no change currently in abortion access in Maine.
Thank you. There is a question in the Q&A from Melody Schreiber with Guardian US. What do you make of the criminal enterprise of Comstock Act? And for background, that is in his dissent in the Supreme Court, Justice Thomas called the mailing of mifepristone to patients, quote, criminal enterprise. He also noted that the 1873 Comstock Act, which broadly banned people from using the mail to send anything, quote, obscene, lewd, or lascivious, including any article or thing designed or intended for the prevention of conception or procuring an abortion, should apply to mifepristone. I know you're all physicians and not lawyers, but do you have a reaction to that dissent from Justice Thomas?
Hard to respond to. I don't think Justice Thomas has ever needed to access care for his women's health needs.
I think that would outlaw birth control being mailed, prevention of conception. So I think there's been a lot of talk about the Comstock Act and its use to try and restrict abortion, and I think that I think that had been dealt with previously legally, but I'm not a lawyer or a judge, so I can't definitively comment.
I always just like to note the year in which the Comstock Act was passed and think about how irrelevant the concept of it is in 2026, particularly with relation to mailing things and telehealth, right? We've seen, particularly post-COVID pandemic, all medical specialties and so much of our care, we've realized the benefit to our patients of having, more access to care, doing telehealth, mailing things. And so, yes, same, not an attorney, but it seems that a law that was passed in 1873 really should no longer be of any consideration and relevance to modern medicine.
Thank you. Eli Newman, I'm with Bridge. I'll let you ask your question.
Hello, thank you so much for taking my call and for holding this press conference. I'm Eli Newman. I'm a health reporter with Bridge, Michigan. So my focus is focused on Michigan affairs. So my questions will be more directed to Dr. Burke. My earlier this week, we were on a call with Planned Parenthood of Michigan, who outlined some dire financial situation. They were asking the state for $5 million to keep some of their clinics operating through October. Um, I, I more so kind of wanted to understand like what it means to operate some of these clinics, even if they're not Planned Parenthood, to kind of those outside of the network in the state, and if there are concerns about maintaining even clinical access. Obviously, this mifepristone ruling is really focused on telemedicine, but I'm wondering if Dr. Burke, you have heard from your colleagues about the difficulty of maintaining these services, even with walk-in appointments and in-person meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Dr. Bain, but
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. Yeah, so I'm a rural health physician, and this is not unique to this one service provider under the name Planned Parenthood. This is every OBGYN, every women's health office in Michigan. We have huge areas of what are healthcare and maternity care deserts right now, where there are zero OBGYNs. I am one of 4 OBGYNs in an entire hour or 60, 70-mile radius of where I practice. I've been up for 24 hours. I was on call last night. We have 1 OBGYN at the office right now, and we're about to go down to 3 with one of our physicians leaving to out of state. So the operating costs obviously are a barrier. Staffing our offices is a barrier. And so I can do 30 telehealth visits in a day, and seeing people in office takes more time. And so when you look at access and you look at barriers to care, our number one barrier is people. Number one barrier is physicians and providers. But also, yes, the cost of keeping these offices open and paying our staff, that absolutely is a concern all across the state, and really across the nation.
I had a question in the chat that I'll just ask now, and I'm just wondering if there's, and this is maybe for broadly for all the doctors on the call, but like, is there anything that you're advising your patients to do in preparation for a potential restriction of the access to mifepristone?
For me, not so much telling patients. I think it's more of just having the plans in place, the operational plans of what it's going to look like if we have to go back to, trying to add people into the office, and what does that look like? How can we get them in? And when we only have 3 to 4 doctors to see, 40,000 people. And so the operational piece is where we're focused on. And then the operational piece, so we have 1 OR team at a time for a huge part of our service area. And so how do we make sure we're going to have access for having OR time and anesthetic care and operating room care and operating room nurses for the possibility of needing to do additional procedures to both manage miscarriage care.
In Maine, a lot of abortions are done through Maine Family Planning, which is different than Planned Parenthood. It's 2 separate entities, and they do an incredible number of medication abortions. Their funding has been impacted by the federal government refusing to pay entities that do abortions for primary care. And so they had to shut down their primary care practice, which was hugely important for people of reduced means, in order to continue their abortion practice. So these decisions, these court rulings, these suits have implications beyond just abortion care.
Absolutely.
Um,
Go ahead, Dr. Becker.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I was just going to say, not really any specific recommendations to patients in terms of preparation, but when patients bring it up to me, sort of feeling frustrated or, having a lot of stress or angst about the chaos and confusion, I often use it as an opportunity to talk about the importance of voting, and voting as a social driver of health. And these are the prime examples to patients of, that unfortunately our politics are more and more interfering with our ability to provide care. And while that's not perhaps going to fix their access to mifepristone in the coming weeks to months, that is one thing that every American can do to, and in their state level and their local elections, federal elections, to voice our concerns and to try to keep things like this from hopefully not continuing to happen in the future.
Absolutely. We have a follow-up question from Melody, but first I'm going to allow Joyce Frieden with MedPage Today to ask a question, and then we'll go to Melody's follow-up. So Joyce, feel free to ask your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Several of you mentioned how patients, expressed confusion or said, which, is understandable, or said they're trying to keep up with things. Have you noticed any change in volume of people coming and wanting this to happen, wanting this service, like maybe they're afraid to ask for it or aren't coming? I mean, or are you seeing just as many people as before?
In North Carolina, we have, at least the data I have seen is not dramatically, that I think could attribute to this as sort of a shift in, like, a decline in patients seeking medication, abortion, or medication managed miscarriage. I think even it's been increasing over recent years, because it is so effective, it is so safe, for the reasons that both Dr. Bain and Dr. Nalboff were mentioning, avoiding costs of operating room and anesthesia. I think nationally and in many states, we are seeing a bigger shift to more patients, the majority of abortions and a lot of miscarriage care being managed medically, because we still have access to very effective medication regimens. So I haven't seen any sort of decline in terms of patients being afraid to access it. Now, there may be some out there that we don't know about, but I don't know of any data that has shown that.
I would agree. And I would say probably the only thing we see like ebb and flows in that increase when there's more confusion is requests for sterilization. Like we definitely see that those requests go up when there is talk of increasing restrictions, even in our state where abortion care is protected currently. We definitely get upticks where some of my days are like 5-10 people coming in requesting sterilization at very young ages because they are worried about not having agency over their reproductive health.
I agree with that. And the other part I will say is that one shift I think we tend to see is perhaps patients seeking abortion care earlier because of concerns about restrictions and gestational age limits, sometimes so early that perhaps it's too soon to even confirm that they are pregnant, but they have a little bit of panic and angst about not making sort of these cutoffs that have been set by our legislators. But I agree with Dr. Bain. We see these ebbs and flows as we've seen changes in abortion legislation of significant increases in patients desiring sterilization.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. And then back to the follow-up from Melody with Guardian. Follow-up to the question about the Comstock Act. Melody is wondering if you all as physicians are worried about possible prosecution under the Comstock Act.
Yeah, I think all physicians are worried at all times, right? Like we went into medicine to take great care of our patients, and I can't take great care of my patients if I'm not working and if I'm in jail, right? So I think that's a fear for everybody, no matter what they are doing in healthcare right now. My ER colleagues are very worried. My family practice colleagues are very worried. Even people who are trauma surgeons and have a patient with a trauma, serious trauma, who have a positive pregnancy test, like the repercussions and fear that have gone along with that, of any legislation that criminalizes the care that we give, is worrisome to physicians, I would say. But from the Comstock Act specifically, I think that's one that, when we look at, like, understanding a law that was created over 100 years ago and how that applies to today and the relevance of today, and what was the purpose of the law, and could those people even understand that, like, what technology would bring in our ability to care for people in the safe manner that we're doing it now. Yeah. So the answer to the question, I think, is yes.
Thank you.
Agree. Yes, I think not just specifically the Comstock Act, but yeah, I mean, I'll just echo what Dr. Bain said. Healthcare, and not just physicians and not just APPs, but nurses are scared, right? Everyone's afraid of touching and interacting with the patient scenario that we know medically is the right thing to do for our patients. But because of the changing laws and requirements, there's a constant fear of, is this legal? Am I going to be prosecuted? Am I going to go to jail? Right. And so it impacts our ability to provide care for our patients in that moment. And it adds to the ongoing stress, and other things of our job. And we already have enough stressors as being physicians, that having to worry about going to jail for taking care of our patients in the way that we've been trained to do really should not exist, but unfortunately does.
And again, practicing in Maine, we're sort of insulated by the legislature, by the governor from that kind of prosecution. And it emphasizes what Dr. Beckham said about voting. If you want to be protected as a patient, if you want to be protected as a physician, vote for those who will do that protection.
Absolutely. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we'll go ahead and conclude today's call. If you would like a copy of the recording, please send me an email at annika@committeetoprotect.org. I put that in the chat, and I can get that over to you shortly. But thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you so much to our speakers, Dr. Beckham, Dr. Nalaboff, and Dr. Bain, for your time and your advocacy on behalf of your patients. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you for
Have a
having
great
us.
day.